Good afternoon, everyone. Once again, this is David Stearns with Haley Marketing Group, and welcome to today's Lunch with Haley webinar. The title for today's webinar is Uncertainty and Chaos, Planning for 2012. And in preparation for today's webinar, I started to think about that it's the fourth quarter, that everybody's starting to think about what the next year is going to look like. And if you're like me, right now, you have no idea what next year is going to look like. So I'm not here with the crystal ball to tell you that I know what the economy is going to do next year. But what we're really going to talk about is strategies for dealing with the economy, whatever it happens to do. And there's some tailwinds pushing the staffing industry that are great. Hopefully they'll keep pushing us even more strongly next year. And there are some headwinds that we're coming into that seriously threaten to derail the U.S. and the global economies. And the question is, whichever way things go, what are you going to do to address it? So for today's webinar, here's the agenda. First thing, we're going to start off with a little introduction of some of the good and some of the not so good of what is going on right now in the industry and in the economy. Then we're going to talk about my dad's #1 lesson for survival regardless of market conditions, something he taught me many years ago that I will share with you today. We're going to take a look back at some history lessons. We had some clients that even in that awful year of 2009, some did pretty well and some actually did quite well and ending the year up. And we're going to take a look at some of the secrets of their success. We're going to review 3 foolproof, or as I put, almost foolproof business strategies, ways to virtually insulate and ensure your success regardless of what the economy does. We're going to talk about planning for the worst, and not just hoping for the best, but also planning for the best, and what you can do now to plan for the economy heading in either direction, good or bad. We're going to take a look at 11 different growth strategies that are used within the staffing industry. And we're going to wrap things up with some very specific ideas in regard to what you can do with marketing for your firm next year. All right, let's kick it off with the good news. Good news, Staffing Industry Analyst 2012 forecasts. And I don't have every sector of the staffing industry up here, but I'll share a little bit of their data. Everything's up. They are forecasting continued growth for 2012, a 10% increase in direct hire over 2011, a 12% increase in IT staffing, an 8% increase in finance and accounting, and a 7% increase in commercial. So not dramatic gains, but consistent gains. The industry's leading research firm is telling us we're going to see more demand next year than we are seeing currently this year. And I think that good news is supported by some more good news, and these are just a couple of quotes that I recently read. #1, employers are scared of taking on permanent employees. Now, for those of you on today's call who are executive recruiters, you may not like to see that message, but for everybody who does temporary and contract staffing, this is exceptionally good news. Businesses are shorthanded. They need people. They're afraid of hiring, and as you're seeing already, they would much rather mitigate their risks by bringing on a temporary employee than adding a full-time member to their staff. So assuming that the economy doesn't take a sudden downturn, that really supports the fact that we're going to see continued growth. And another group I saw online, Business Insider, said their data showed that the latest economic indicators are confirming that the rebound remains in effect, and all that you're seeing in the news about are we heading back into another recession, well, that's not really being proven out by the economic indicators right now. So the good news is there's a lot of good news. There's a lot of things pointing to continued growth for the staffing industry and moderate growth, which is a good thing for most businesses because moderate growth is growth that is easier to control, easier to manage. But it's not all good news. And some of the things we have to deal with. #1, staffing employment. It's been relatively flat the past 3 months. If you look at the growth rate, it had been increasing month over month this year, but since August, it's really flattened out. Flat's okay, but it's not going to get us the 7 to 12% growth that Staffing Industry Analyst is forecasting. Another concern was the October 2011 use of staffing, and the number of people working as temporary employees was actually 2.1% lower than October 2010. So just in the most recent month, we are seeing a slight downturn in the number of temporaries out there, a little bit of cause for concern. And I think what's been driving the cause of concern recently has been Europe. I'm not going to, for a minute, pretend to let you know that I understand the complexities of what's happening in the European credit market, but I do know this. The stock market's been chaotic. My 401k's bounced up and down by day, and every time a new announcement comes out of Greece or Italy or Spain, the market rallies or collapses. Now, what's it really going to mean? How's Europe going to come out of this? We don't know. And it could have devastating impacts, from what I've read, on the U.S. market if Europe doesn't pull through this mess. And if they go down and we go down with them, we are definitely going to have a recession. And of course, in the U.S., it's an election year. So kind of all bets are off as to exactly what the government will try to do. You can rest assured that the Democrats are going to want to do everything in their possible to stimulate the economy, to show gains right before the November elections to help Obama get reelected, and the Republicans are going to do everything they can to stand in the way to try to show that the current administration is failing. So the most likely outcome is probably gridlock, which from a business owner's perspective might be the best thing of all. The one piece of data that I don't have on the slide, but that I found the most disconcerting, was one I read in an email I received yesterday. And it was from Bob Cohen at R.A. Cohen, and the email was talking about trends in the economy. And he cited a group called the Economic Cycle Research Institute, and that they do a weekly index to measure the economy, and their index is continuing to fall and is now indicating that a recession is coming. What makes me nervous about this is this particular group has never been wrong about predicting the future. Now, there's always a first time, but if they've never been wrong and they're saying we're heading into a recession, then all these other people who are forecasting continued growth might be wrong, and we need to prepare for the possibility, hopefully unlikely possibility, that 2012 is going to look more like 2009 than it does 2011. So, assuming the worst, assuming we're heading into another recession, what do you do? Well, here's what I'm going to share with you. My dad's #1 lesson, surviving in a recession, and it's very, very simple. You ready? Make the economy the other guy's problem. Now, if you are on today's call and you are from a large international staffing firm, this doesn't really benefit you. Simple reason is you're too big to make the global economy the other guy's problem. It is your problem as an international organization. But from everybody on today's call who's part of an independent company, part of a smaller firm, a regional firm, somebody who may just be managing your own local office, you can make the economy the other guy's problem, because a small company is almost never tied to the overall economy. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to take a hit, and it doesn't mean your clients are going to cut their use of staffing services. It just means that unless the market's going to zero, there's still business out there to be had. Your job is to figure out how to get it. So how do you actually accomplish this goal? Well, I've got 4 techniques for making the economy the other guy's problem. And you're going to want to grab a pencil because these aren't written as bullet points. #1, and the most obvious, is to win the local battles. And this is the most fundamental way you provide staffing services, is you out-service the competition by providing faster fills, better matches, and even in a bad economy when everybody's saying we don't need to recruit, you become better at recruiting than anybody else so that you can provide better talent faster. You become the most responsive local staffing firm, and that's how you win the local battle when job orders are placed. The second thing you do is you out-hustle the competition. And that doesn't just mean more cold calls. You sell harder and smarter. You become more responsive to your client's business needs. You find ways to add more value. And we're going to talk about how to do a bunch of these things later on in this presentation when we get to some of the specific strategies for planning for the worst and planning for the best. But you find ways to deliver more value to your clients than your competition is delivering. And if today all you're doing is filling orders for temporary help, well, that level of value may not be sufficient to retain your customer's business next year. You may have to do a better job helping them to plan, helping them to retain talent, helping them to evaluate and develop their internal people, helping them to proactively build a bench or build their pipeline. There may be lots of ways you can help their business deal with a downturn, which makes you a more valuable business partner. The next thing you do during a downturn to make the recession the other guy's problem is to be more creative. This is a time for finding ways to invent new services. If you look back at the last 20 years of staffing and see how much our industry has changed, there was no such thing 20 years ago as a VOP program. There was no VMS. People didn't talk about MSPs. There was no RPO. Those are all services that have been created, most of them within the last 10 years, in order for staffing companies to provide new ways to deliver value. During a downturn is an exceptionally good time to find new ways to help your clients survive, help your clients better manage talent, help your clients get work done more efficiently. Being more creative is also about finding new markets. This may be a time to get even more focused than you are today. And the reason for focus is people want to deal with specialists. And when you get afraid of spending money, it becomes all the more important to spend your dollars with someone who is an expert in your field. So finding new markets may be about developing a niche focus that you can take outside of your local geography and into other markets. But you become so good at recruiting certain types of people or solving certain types of business problems that nobody can match your level of expertise and your ability to deliver value. You also might look at providing new kinds of temporary employees. There are new job titles being created, and if you look, in fact, when I was at my 20th reunion for graduate school last spring, one of the professors who was giving a speech said 85% of the people I graduated from MBA school with are now working in industries that did not exist when we graduated from college. And it was an astonishing statistic, but it was true. There was no internet. Nobody worked in anything to do with online marketing, and he listed off about a dozen other industries that didn't exist. But look at all the industries that have been popping up. Look at what's happening with social media. Look at how it is changing not just marketing, but recruiting, communications. That will spawn all new kinds of careers, and that will spawn new kinds of demands for people. That's how you find the ability to provide new kinds of temps. If you go back to the late 80s, a company that is now known as Aquint back in the late 80s started as Mac Temps. Why? They saw an opportunity to provide specialists who operated Mac computers. And now they are one of the largest graphic design staffing firms in the world, if not the largest graphic design staffing firm and marketing staffing firm, because they found something new and they focused on it. Also, being creative is about finding new ways to sell. At both the executive forum this year and at the ASA conference, there was talk about the need to be able to more effectively sell to smaller clients. You can't use traditional staffing sales models of having a salesperson knocking on doors and making cold calls to go after smaller clients who don't have that much volume of business. If you're going to sell to someone who doesn't do that much volume, you need more efficient sales methods, more efficient ways to attract and communicate with people so that you can cost effectively sell to someone whose volume of services won't be as great as your traditional client. And then the fourth way to make the economy the other guy's problem is to defend your own turf. Make sure that you're not losing business at the same time you're working on these new ways to be creative and out-hustle the competition. And that's about deepening client relationships, which we're going to talk a little bit more about in a few minutes, and expanding your client share so you're getting a larger percentage of each client's business, or you're helping them find more ways to use your services. So again, just to recap for those of you writing it down, the four things to making the economy the other guy's problem: win those local battles, and that's through better service. Out-hustle the competition by being smarter about how you sell and more responsive. Be more creative in terms of inventing services, markets, and ways to sell. And defend your turf so that you're not losing clients as you're trying to bring new ones in the front door. Now, just in case the economy does take a turn for the worse, let's now take a look back in time. Let's go back to 2009 and let's take a look at some of the strategies companies used to survive. Because if you're on today's call, you probably used one of these or maybe more than one of these strategies, but let's take a look at what we've seen across the industry. Number one is the one that almost everybody used, batten down the hatches. You know trouble's coming, so what's the first thing you do? You cut expenses, or at least you identify the expenses you can cut. You start to manage results and your people more closely. You may find that you have to do activity measurement and management more regularly and more closely. Everyone hates to be micromanaged, but when you get into a downturn, that's more of what you need is the micromanagement to make sure you're doing the right activities and you're executing those activities as effectively as possible. You may look at each of your salespeople and start to compare what's their close ratios, what's their call to appointment ratio, and then really work with the people who have better ratios to learn their techniques and train the rest of your team to improve performance on all of your key metrics that will drive ultimately more results. You have to look at cutting things that are non-producing, whether it's expenses that are not adding enough value to the business or it's people who aren't delivering. If you've got people who are really good order takers but not really strategic staffing sales consultants, during a recession, you can't afford to have those people on, so they either have to be trained or replaced. You also want to look at building cash reserves, and that's a batten down the hatch tactic you can use today, which is you want to make sure you have enough money put away that you can weather the storm, that you can continue to fund your sales and marketing efforts to continue to have a strong presence regardless of what's happening in the economy and regardless of the downturn, within reason, within your own business. So the second strategy that we saw people take was divestiture, getting more focused. And you may provide staffing for just one specific discipline today, in which case this strategy is not going to apply to you. But if you do staffing in a variety of different disciplines, or you're trying to be almost all things to the clients you serve, you may say that's a mistake. And one of our clients in particular, they had a healthcare division and they had a commercial staffing division, and they made the decision to divest, to sell off their healthcare division in 2009. Now, they didn't get the best sales price they could possibly have received. Maybe if they held on to it and grown it back up, they would have got a better value to selling it, but it also might have put them out of business. Because while they were splitting their efforts to manage two different businesses, both were headed down. Instead, they sold one, got a cash influx, used the cash influx to improve operations in their core business, and managed to get even stronger as the downturn continued. They also got rid of a lot of expenses in areas that were not as profitable for them. Next strategy is to look for ways to maximize your impact. And now, you're going to expect me to say this because I'm a marketing guy, but these are really companies that got more aggressive about marketing. And if I look back, I can consistently see which of our clients recovered fastest and which of our clients recovered strongest. It's the ones who continued to make a commitment to their sales efforts, to their marketing efforts, regardless of what happened in the economy. Those who tried to consolidate and save money by cutting sales and marketing, some didn't survive, some took a lot longer to recover. What can you do? Now, let me give you an example of a specific company that went into 2009, took a big hit at the end of 2008. They were down quite a bit by mid-2009. By October, they had caught up to 2008, and by December of 2009, they finished with an up year. So what did they do? Number one, they built a new website. Now, why was a new website important in a recession? Because they didn't have a strong online presence. People weren't finding them. Their new website allowed them to dramatically reduce what they were spending on recruiting. So even though they made an investment in a website, it was more than offset by the recruitment savings, and their new presence positioned them better, which helped them to close more of their prospects. Number two, they got really heavily involved in the local community. Not selling, but as a supporter of the community in lots of activities, sponsoring events, constantly sharing good news with people. They became a beacon of good news stories in their marketplace. They made people believe that they were doing well, and businesses want to work with other businesses that are successful, and particularly if it's a down year, they want to work with people they think know the secret of success. And this company did a great job demonstrating, hey, we know it. Number 3, they did a lot, dramatically more, low-pressure outbound marketing via email and social media to support their sales efforts so that everywhere people looked, they were seeing this company. Number 4, they did more branding in their local market. The community involvement was about community service. The branding was about sponsoring events, getting their people out there, participating in various events so that, again, everywhere their candidates are, they're showing up. Everywhere their clients are, their name is to be seen. And they did it in smart ways. They would find ways that didn't cost a ton of money by participating in events where they could have their staff show up wearing shirts, where they might do sponsorships, where they did some very creative PR to get free publicity for their business about success stories going on in their marketplace. This company, in just 3 months' time, increased traffic to their website by 1,500%. And as I mentioned, within 7 months of really getting aggressive from the web and the online marketing perspective, turned around their year and ended up. So what they did is they said, we're going to make smart investments to maximize our impact locally to win more of the business that's still going on in our market despite the weak economy. The next strategy that some of our clients use was service line extensions. And this one scares me because it's highly risky. We're actually going to talk about service line extensions later, but it's going after hotter sectors or industries. If you're in an industry that's taking a big hit, I was at the Healthcare Staffing Summit 6 weeks ago, and people in the nursing market took a huge hit in 2009. So some of those people extended into other segments of healthcare, whether it's allied or doctors, where there was more hiring going on. They could leverage their expertise, leverage their recruiting skills because they had no choice. Some of our clients combined a service line extension with the divestiture message by becoming more focused. So some of our clients that did IT staffing focused on healthcare IT because there were some issues driving the need for investment in healthcare IT that were independent of the economy. These people had to spend. So this company could say, we're going to be better than anybody in our market at knowing healthcare IT and try to win a larger proportion of that segment of the business, try to dominate it to help drive revenues for our firm. The last one on the list here, that was very successful for a number of clients, was getting into government contracting, particularly those firms that are minority-owned or disabled veteran-owned. Getting on the GSA schedule, which is a lengthy, hard process, was, for a couple of our clients, an absolute lifesaver. It was those government contracts that kept them surviving because in a bad recession, as everyone knows, the government invests. The government spends stimulus dollars, and one of the things they want to do is spend money with small businesses. So it's an opportunity, if you're on the GSA schedule today, to leverage it in 2012. If you're not on there, to think about that as a potential market opportunity for next year. But be forewarned, it's a difficult process to get on there. You may actually look for somebody who's not a staffing company who's already on the GSA services list and see if there are ways to partner with them so they can provide your services. And I'm not an expert in GSA contracting, so this is not legal advice. You would need to check with somebody who's already on the schedule to see what you can and can't do. And one other idea, and it's going to come along later, and it's kind of like a bonus idea for the 5 history lessons. This is not a history lesson that our clients did, but it came out of one of the points we're going to talk about in a little bit, the idea of a merger. And mergers are typically done to capitalize on opportunity, but in a real bad recession, a merger can do one other thing. It can save cost. So if you consolidate back office operations, you might take a direct competitor, maybe somebody who provides another type of staffing service that would be a complement of yours, and consolidate operations under one building, under one set of back office staff, and knock cost out without negatively impacting either business's ability to sell. All right, so that's looking back. Now let's look at some eternal truths before we get down to some strategies for growth. The following are 3 strategies to help protect your business regardless of what the economy does. Strategy number one is to build a moat. And when you're in the if you're in the world of high tech and you talk to the venture capital people, one of the things they always talk about with businesses they're going to invest in is there a moat around the business? And for those of you who've never heard that expression, what you're talking about, just like a moat surrounds a castle as a barrier to someone storming that castle, you want a moat around your business to protect yourself from the competition, to protect yourself from new entrants. So how do you build a moat around your staffing business? Well, number one is you get more entrenched into your clients' businesses. You become more a part of how they operate and not just a supplier of people. You might do that through providing reports that they rely on as part of their management reporting. You might do it by taking a more proactive stance in management of their staffing and hiring. You might do it by providing planning services, so you're actually part of their team to plan their hiring needs. You might do it by the technology you provide and getting them hooked into your technology platform, whether it's a VMS platform or maybe you build your own system for them to help facilitate ordering temporary employees. What you're trying to do is make it harder for people to replace your services. And again, it's managing the process more efficiently. You're moving up the value chain to help make it easier for them to work with you, and at the same time you're making it much more painful for them to switch to somebody else. Some specific examples is you might sit down and do workforce planning with your clients and do plans for individual departments. You might build and maintain a database of your clients' job descriptions, so anytime they need to place an order, they can just jump onto your website, grab their own job rec, and submit it to you. You might automate the requisition process so it's faster and easier to request an employee. And you might tie them in with your online timekeeping, access to your billing or reporting systems. So again, if they switch to another vendor that doesn't have those systems, there's a pain in the switching cost. Second thing you want to do is to broaden your client roster. You don't want to have all of your business in a few number of large accounts. You want more small accounts, or right now if you have some of those giant accounts and you just want more accounts, period. Ideally, no more than 10% of your business should come from one client. And I remember dealing with someone back in 2001 when we had a mild recession compared to 2009, and 90% of their business was in two companies. Within 6 months, both companies changed vendors, and this company lasted about 1 month after that. They didn't have cash reserves, they didn't have a broad client base, they didn't have a sales plan because they were so busy servicing their two mega clients. Killed them. So you want to find ways to broaden your client roster. If you already service small businesses, you want to broaden that base further. If you service larger clients, augment them with a base of small clients to try to get down your largest clients so that nobody's over 10%. Next is one I just mentioned a few minutes ago, which is to improve your recruiting, especially for hard-to-find talent. During a downturn, you want to be the fastest to fill, and you want to make sure that every job order you get gets filled. Nothing helps sustain your business more than 100% fill rate. And nothing will attract clients back to you more effectively than quality fills that are done faster than anybody else. So it's a little bit counterintuitive to recruit more during a downturn, but that's exactly what you want to do, is become the best at recruiting the kinds of people that your customers are most likely to need. All right, now there's an adage in strategic planning that says you plan for the worst and you hope for the best. But we really want to plan for the worst and plan for the best. And one of the things I'm going to suggest to you for next year is to develop 3 budgets. Your first budget should be your most likely scenario, what you expect to see in terms of growth, assuming staffing industry analyst forecasts are right and we see moderate growth. And that's going to be your most detailed budget. But then you need to do 2 budgets, one down, one up. And both of those budgets, you're playing what-if scenarios. And how will you react depending on whether or not those what-ifs come true. So for example, in 2009, the staffing industry declined by 24.3%. What if it happened again? What if you lost 10, 20, 30, 50% of your business? It's scary to think about, but how would you react? Now, you may want to do a full budget if you really think some of those negative forecasts are correct, and you may want a full budget saying, what would we do if we were down a certain percentage? How would we manage differently? You may want to just build a list of here's our defensive game plans and our strategies to prevent those worst-case game plans from coming true. Likewise, you want to do a budget that's on the upside. What if we find some opportunities that are significantly better than expected and we could grow by 25% or 50%? Where would we need to make investments? Where will we run into capacity constraints, and how can we plan for them now so that they don't limit our ability to grow when we bump into those constraints? One of the things that you'll definitely want to do now as part of your budgeting process is go back and do a SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and particularly look at your business's weaknesses. You want to evaluate those weaknesses, and then once you develop a list of everything that's a business weakness, figure out which is the greatest risk to your business. So let's say you're weak because it's taking you too long to fill job orders. And maybe you're weak because your cash flow is not as strong as you'd like to be because it's taking clients too long to pay. And you may have a list of other weaknesses. Well, which of those things, if they got worse, would have the biggest negative impact on your business? What you do is you figure out priorities from that, knowing what's going to be the absolute worst negative impact, and then looking at it and saying, what can we do today to make improvements in that area? So this is just a kind of scientific, if you will, way of looking at the SWOT analysis to prioritize your weaknesses, defend against them now, so in the event things get bad, you've already planned for them. And in the event things get good, you've still strengthened your business. And as I said, if you don't want to develop 3 full budgets, at a minimum, do your primary budget and play what-if scenarios so you'll know how you'd make adjustments depending on what happens in the economy. Next step to planning for the worst, get more aggressive now. If you're doing well right now, you've got a positive cash flow, you've got money, think about what your tax bill is going to be at the end of this year and say, let's start making some intelligent investments now. Use some of those dollars we were going to pay to the government to get more aggressive about how we're approaching the marketplace, how we're branding ourselves. More targeted marketing to make sure you're in front of the people you want to sell to, building relationships with more people, doing more repetition in your communications, in other words, touching people more frequently in ways that they find useful and interesting, building a stronger presence both online so you've got a bigger footprint when people are doing searches online, and offline so when they're looking for vendors or looking for work, they're seeing your company. And building this more aggressive business plans, more aggressive marketing plan, make sure you start today by developing a very, very clear definition of how you want to be seen. You've heard me say this on lots of Lunch with Haley's before. Positioning is all about defining, using the specific words of how you want people to see you. If you don't want to be seen as just another staffing firm, then how do you want to be seen? Write down that definition. Make sure everybody in your company knows it, and then make investments in your marketing, your training of your sales team, your training of your service team, so that you are delivering that message consistently from top to the bottom of your organization. Third strategy to plan for the worst is get out with your clients now and help them build plans. Create individual hiring plans, retention plans, succession plans, workforce planning documents for your clients for 2012. Help them to understand the likely timing of their needs for talent. When do they think they're going to need to hire? What kind of projects could drive more need? Understand the business issues that will make them go up or down next year. How resilient will they be to the economy? How impacted will they be if things get better or worse? Position yourself as someone who is prepared to be a more responsive partner by proactively recruiting, helping them build a talent pipeline for the economy regardless of what happens, helping them deal with their own employees in the unfortunate event they have to have a layoff or they have to have a downturn. Now's the time also to investigate new services. You don't want to launch a new service when times are tough. It's a lot easier to do it when times are good. So if you're going to look at new vertical markets to go after, new job disciplines to focus, new industries to serve, try to figure out where are our best opportunities. And if you did that SWOT analysis, the O in SWOT is opportunities. You've investigated the various opportunities to grow your firm, and you can now take your best guess assessment as which opportunities are the biggest and most likely to come to fruition, and then figure out what do we have to do to capitalize on those opportunities. How do we have to have new services, new people, new business models? Do we have to hire? Do we have to train people? Is now the time to look for an acquisition? It's a lot easier to build a plan and fund a plan for new services and have it launched and running before a recession hits than in the middle of it. Now my next bullet kind of fights with that last one, because now is also the time to either set aside capital or talk to your bank or funding source about your line of credit and see if you can get an increase so that you can ensure funding for sales and marketing. And no, this isn't self-serving so you can spend money with Haley Marketing Group. This is about making sure that you do not limit the impact you're making in the market regardless of the economy. As I mentioned, 100% of our clients who were more aggressive in sales and marketing during 2009 recovered better, faster, and more strongly than those who did not. We've had clients who had more than 100% increase in sales since they bottomed out, and they attribute it to a combination of never giving up on sales and marketing and continuing to be aggressive. The worst thing you can do during a downturn is disappear, because people's assumption is there's something wrong with your business, and nobody wants to work with a vendor when they think there's something wrong. And lastly, in planning for the worst, and this may be one of the hardest things to do, but is to try to identify trigger points. How will you know things are getting bad? Everyone's heard the analogy of, if you put a frog in a pot of boiling water, if the water's already boiling, it'll jump right out. But if you put him in a pot of cool water and turn up the temperature slowly, he'll boil to death in there, because he won't notice the temperature changes when they're happening incrementally. Well, the same thing happens when your business is going down. Well, the tendency is to say, well, things will get better. It's not really that bad. How will you know when it's time to pull the trigger on hiring or firing, on adding services or cutting services? You have to try to identify what you will use as trigger points for taking action. And as best you can, you're going to measure it by where you see opportunities. Maybe you bring in a key client that allows you to capitalize on a new business. Maybe it'll be when sales hit a certain level, it's time to consolidate. This is not a perfect science, but at least if you can start to identify the things you would look for in your business, and now you can sit down every single month or every single week and say, let's look at those metrics and see where we stand. If we're seeing a steady decline in the number of appointments we're having, well, maybe we need first to invest in training. If it's still going down, maybe we need to cut our sales force. But again, knowing those trigger points will help you take intelligent actions. And likewise, let's look at the positive. You also want to plan for the best. We don't want to just hope for the best. We want to be ready to capitalize it. So you wanted to know, what are you going to do if things started to get really good? Maybe in your local market you see a boom because of some key employer that comes to town, and now there's a lot of hiring. How will you expand sales and marketing? Are you going to go out and hire people? If so, start to identify those people now. If you're going to grow your business, in what areas and what marketing and sales support will you need that you'll make investments in? Get those plans ready now so that you can pull the trigger as soon as the trigger points hit. How will you exploit hot disciplines and industries? Create those business plans now so you're ready to act fast. If you've been thinking, hey, the fastest growth in the staffing industry is in IT, accounting and finance, and legal, we're not doing that. We want to be in that marketplace. Get your game plan together now. Figure out what you're going to do in terms of an operating model, in terms of sales, in terms of service, and be ready to pull the trigger. Or as we talked about earlier, if you've got the cash flow, pull the trigger now, get your experience while things are going well, and now you have the ability to better weather the storm by being in that industry you wanted to be in. Now's the time to get out there and understand the new markets. Start doing your research. Understand their hiring needs, their business issues, and the kinds of staffing services and business strategies you're going to have to be able to bring to them. If you're in manufacturing and you want to jump over to call center, well, those businesses don't operate the same ways. You want to learn about that industry, so you go in not as a staffing provider, but as a workforce consultant or a talent consultant in that new industry. You're really ready to have intelligent conversation because you've done your homework. Do it now. And as I mentioned earlier, become a recruiting specialist. Gain an edge now in attracting talent in one or multiple areas by improving your recruiting tools, training your recruiters, developing or hiring new recruiters, and then looking at your own internal operations and thinking about how can we be a best place to work for the kinds of internal staff and the kinds of contractors and temporaries we want to attract. If you're not already the best place to work in your local marketplace, start being one so that you can attract the better candidates to you, because in a downturn, the best database will help you to win and get through it. And in an upturn, the best database will help you to grow even faster. You also want to look to build in flexible capacity. And what do I mean by that? Well, you're in the staffing business. So as a staffing firm, take your own advice. Have a plan to use temporary labor, contractors, to bring in support for your sales team, for your recruiters, for your marketing department, so that you can help free those people up to be more productive by taking some of the C&D tasks off their plate. It's ironic, but the majority of temp staffing firms aren't using temps every day, and you probably should be if you thought about the ways you could help make your own business more efficient by taking your most productive people and giving them more time to focus on their most productive activities. And lastly, in planning for the best, look to make low-risk investments. In other words, now's not the time, and with all this uncertainty, to take a big giant gamble on a new service, a new discipline you know nothing about. Now's the time to try to make investments low risk first. And by low risk, if I'm going to go into a new geographic market, I'm probably going to try to partner with a client that's already there rather than start from scratch. I might invest in tools, whether it's new staffing technology, new marketing support, that would boost my staff's productivity before I invested in hiring additional staff. I would look at ways to help the salespeople be more productive by taking away the time that they need to enter data into a computer, or maybe do research and get some interns or temps to do that for them. I would look to how I could provide them with marketing before and after their sales calls to increase their close ratios. I would look for more efficient ways to recruit before hiring recruiters, to better leverage my search engine optimization, to better leverage my social media marketing, to better leverage job aggregators online so I can spend less on recruiting. Those are some examples of low-risk investments. Okay, we're now going to go into a section where we're going to look at 11 different growth strategies that have all been used in the staffing industry. And before we do, I got to give a big shout out and thank you to our friends from Crestmark. Crestmark is a funding company that works with the staffing industry, and they have a terrific guide. You can download the guide at the URL you'll see on the screen for the next 3 pages. These strategies for growth will give you the pros and the cons in detail of different ways you could grow a staffing company, but I'm going to give you the highlights right now of these 11 different strategies. First, we're going to look at organic growth, ways to grow your business by doing more of what you do today from the inside. Number 1 on the list is increasing market share. In other words, this is sell more of what you already sell. This is the most basic of all growth strategies. Essentially, do more of what you do today. It's the least risky because you already know how to do it, and it's the easiest to pursue because there's no learning curve. The downside to increasing market share is, number 1, there may be limitations, just depending on the size of your market as to how much you can grow organically. Also, you may find your competitors are tough to beat, and it may be hard to dislodge them. So increasing market share is what everybody is trying to do. Easiest, but can be the toughest because of competition. The second on the list is increasing client share, which means to win a larger percentage of each of your current clients' business. This can be done by becoming the sole vendor or primary vendor who gets more of their job orders they're currently placing. Or it can be done by teaching your clients new ways to use staffing more strategically, to use it in place of hiring, to use it to augment their current team where they weren't thinking about using staffing today, so that you can increase the total amount of staffing purchases they make, and all those new dollars they're spending go to you. If you're going to increase client share, you have to be much more consultative to win this business. Now, some people will win client share on price, and that's what you're going to compete against. The positive side to winning client share is it's always easier to get more business out of a current client than it is out of a prospect. It also strengthens your relationships as you deliver more value to them, but it can be hard because you're probably going to run into people who are going to try to beat you on price to dislodge you. Clients may not want more of their business to go to a single vendor because it increases their business risk. Clients may see you as one thing and not be willing to use you to do something else. And depending on who you service, there may not be opportunities to sell them more. The third organic growth strategy is to go about geographic expansion, which is opening new offices. If you look at the billion-dollar plus staffing companies, they all do one thing. They open up lots of offices. Each office is very much like a local independent, although usually not run quite as well as all the independents. But essentially what they are is they are a billion-dollar company made up of 1,000 million-dollar companies. You can do the same thing to open up new offices to grow sales. It allows you to replicate all the things you do really well to essentially clone yourself. However, it's tough. When you go into a new market, you don't have a positive track record. You're an unknown. You're just one of all the other competitors in town. So it can be very difficult to gain market share. It's also very different to manage. If you're used to managing people who report to you every day in the office, now we're managing a remote branch. Completely different form of management, requires different metrics. It may require you to spend a lot of time on the road, which you may or may not want to do. It may require you to add different layers of management, which you may not be used to funding or controlling. And it may have some pretty intensive capital requirements until that new operation becomes profitable. The fourth organic strategy is service line extension, which means adding a new service to your current range that you provide. So it could be adding a new niche market. If you're in IT, maybe you go after legal. If you're in legal, maybe you go after accounting and finance. If you don't offer services, you may want to go after the markets that are more likely to succeed next year. But note, this may be one of the sexiest strategies to chase the hot market, but it's also one of the riskiest. And it's one of the most deceptive. It's incredibly hard to effectively differentiate and open up a new service line. It requires your salespeople to develop new skills. They have to learn how to sell to new types of customers. They may need to sell to new decision makers they're not used to selling to. You may or may not have the recruiting skills you need. Clients may or may not believe you can actually sell or service that other type of talent. I've seen this happen very often with companies that are really successful in industrial staffing, and their clients don't believe they can do high-end accounting positions. It may dilute your focus from your core business, and while you're busy trying to launch the new business, your core business goes down the tubes. And depending on the line of business you get in, it may have all kinds of new insurance considerations to deal with. So again, it can be very risky, but like I gave the example before of some of the IT companies focusing on healthcare, it can also be a key to survival in a tough market. The last organic strategy is one I mentioned earlier. We call it follow the client. And it's a strategy that's a variation of geographic expansion. It mitigates the risk of geographic expansion because you follow your client who loves you into another market where they have a different facility. It's the lowest cost, lowest risk way to open offices in a new market, particularly if you can borrow or sublease space from your client to start doing their recruiting for them. It also allows you to build a candidate database in that new market and to start gaining experience in that new market before you have to really start selling in that new market. The downside is you may be so tight on resources in that new market you don't have time to do any selling or additional recruiting. And other employers in that new market, when you suddenly come out from selling to your existing client, they may see you as somebody that only works for another company and is going to provide the best talent to the company you're loyal to, not to the other firms in the marketplace. Now, after organic growth, the next strategy, or a series of strategies, is mergers and acquisitions. And there's four things we're going to talk about here. Strategic acquisitions are number one on the list.